Today, we're joined by Cole, our Power Platform developer, to talk about the prompting webinar we just completed. So, Cole, will you give us just a really short kind of description, your elevator pitch? What did we talk about, and what would be maybe some key takeaways from the webinar today?
Yeah, absolutely. So we focus a little bit on crit prompting, which is a technique we use here at CIT, which stands for context, role, interrogation, and task. And basically, what it is about is just having really defined and really specific parts to your prompt that kind of cover all four of those concepts. So I think that the biggest takeaways are just being specific and making sure each one of those is present. So just to give it like a slightly extended elevator pitch, the context is everything that you know about the situation and what constraints you have around the situation. The role is kind of a subset of the context because you're saying, I want you to act like X, where X is whatever expert you want sitting next to you for that conversation. And what you're doing with that is you're giving AI or the prompt a lot of information and context based on what that role for that person should know without having to type all of that out every single time. Interrogation, you want to make sure that you are asking the AI to help you see your blind spots and your biases as you're coming into it, as well as what things that you put into the prompt are not clear to it. So you can kind of make sure that you're on the same page before it starts answering anything. And then uh, the task is the actual thing that you want output. And, that one seems kind of obvious because it is the thing that is what you want it to do. But the other piece of that is how you want it to be formatted. So if you want it to be a short email, if you want it to be a long essay, if you want bulleted lists in it, if you don't want bulleted lists, it's all of those pieces. And, all of those were writing examples, but it's just telling it exactly what you want it to do very explicitly and clearly.
Perfect. So, what are some common prompting mistakes people make?
Yeah, so I think that one of the biggest mistakes people make is they try and tell AI how they want the AI to do it instead of asking it for the answer. I kind of gave this example in the webinar, but if you're going to tell it, I want you to write an email that says, and then you write out the whole email, that's really not a good way to use it. And no one's doing that, I don't think. But I've definitely seen ways that people are kind of over holding its hand. And it's a really fine balance because you have to give it enough context and direction to get to where it needs to go. But you don't want to tell it how to get there because then you're going to be telling it how you would get there. And if you're having problems with it and you're taking it to AI, you're just kind of throwing those mistakes into the prompt, and it's not helpful.
That's kind of, I guess, answering a little bit of my next question, which is, are there ways that people construct prompts that kind of manipulate the output?
Yeah. So I think that one's really interesting because um, the really interesting thing there is the best way to get your bias out of a prompt is to put your bias into the prompt very obviously. So you say things like, I have had trouble with it like this because I'm trying to do this, or I know that this is a problem with the way that I'm thinking about it. And the more open you can be about that, and the more you can recognize your bias and put it into there to say, I don't want you to have my bias in here. Here's some of the bias that I think I might be providing. It does a really cool job of kind of noticing that and saying, okay, I got to make sure it's not that direction, even though typically it would be trying to give you that because, again, it wants to give you an answer that you feel good about and that it feels like it gave you what you want to hear, right? And so the best way to tell it to not just give you what you want to hear is to tell it, this is the things that I would normally like, but I want you to avoid because I want a more honest answer than a answer that I want to hear.
Hmm. Definitely. We had a really great question today during the webinar. Someone asked specifically about context and how much is too much. Can you give it too much context when you're creating a prompt?
Absolutely. So when you're creating a prompt, I would say no, you cannot give it too much context. But when you get really far ahead and like you're giving it really, really complex multi phase prompts where you're going back and back and forth, what it's doing is every time the AI gets a new message in that thread, it's actually reading back the entire thing, and they only have so much information that they can take in. So then what's going to happen is it's going to give a lot of irrelevant context, and that's where it can be too much. So when you're giving it a prompt, you just want to make sure that it's still in line with the initial goal of what you were trying to do and switching to a new chat when it feels like you're talking about something else.
Hmm. So I'd love to do a little future focus here. As these AI models that we're using get better at just kind of inferring what your prompt is, do you think these skills will become less relevant?
Yeah, no, I think actually the opposite, because I think that as they become more as they get better at inferring our intent, they are going to see more of our biases that we can't see ourselves. So it's going to
Mhm.
become even more important to make sure that we are trying to get ahead of that and telling it what we want from it. I think the one thing that hopefully will get better is they'll be a little bit less sycophantic and trying to like give us exactly what we want to hear. But I think the idea of giving it enough information in a way that it can understand is always going to be applicable, especially since you're never going to get to the point where you say something very simple and it can know beyond what you said, what you're trying to do. It can maybe have a little bit more idea of where you're trying to go, but it's not going to know the end location unless you give it an end location.
Yeah. So if we were to do this webinar again a year or two from now, how do you think these prompting skills will change, or what will change about your presentation?
Yeah, so I think one thing, it's very funny because prompting as a skill is great language, because the next stage up from prompting is skills. And we mean that as not the skills that you have as a person to do better prompts, but you have what are called skills in AI that are a way to kind of make sure that the AI is always going to do it in a similar way, right? So if we have what we do here at CIT on the AI team is we have some, uh, they're called readiness assessments, where we take um, information on your tenant and try and make sure that you are safe and ready and all the different things that could go wrong, so we can make sure that we patch them up before giving Copilot access to things it shouldn't have access to. And when we do that, we gather all of that information and we want the report to be of a similar output. We want it to have the same branding. We want to make sure that it has the same headers that it covers. Everything that's in there is going to be different. The things that are the specifics of what each customer needs to kind of fix before we're ready for them to have Copilot on in the same way. But the form of how we're doing that and the way we want it to talk about is something that's called a skill. And so when we get farther down the line, I think that this prompting is going to be something that's still very important, but it's going to turn more into how are you using the different skills that you build and how do you build a skill? And then how does your prompt interact with those? One of the biggest thing, or one of the reasons that skills are so effective is that it contains a lot of that crit prompting in the skill, because you're giving it that context of, hey, every time I am calling the skill, I'm going to be doing a report of this type. I'm going to be giving you these things. For the task, I wanted to have these bullet points and these things and this color coding. The role is I want you to act as a analyst who takes the data that I give you, and then I want you to put that into a report. So it's all of these different things. And then in your prompt, you say, I want you to use this this skill, and I want you to use that skill with these pieces of information. But the skill is never going to have everything, right? Every customer is going to be different. When you're using this, it's always going to have some of its own little quirks. So you might have something that says, use this skill using this data. They are a medical company, so we need to be especially sensitive to HIPAA guidelines or something like that. So it's still going to be very important, but it's going to evolve into relying on those skills a little bit more, not to rely on them, I suppose, but to use those skills to make it more efficient and more robust of a prompt without having to do as much upfront work every single time.
Yeah. Yeah, that prompting that we're learning is really kind of the foundation, and then we build on it with those skills, and then eventually agents and all of those pieces.
Exactly.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for taking time to talk to us today. If you're listening to this and you are interested, I'll have the link to the full webinar where you can learn all about our Prompting 101. Thanks so much for joining us, Cole.
Yeah, thank you guys. Have a good one.
Good night.
Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this topic, please let us know. Like, subscribe, or reach out to us at info@cit-net.com or head out to our website, cit-net.com/podcast. We'll be back next week with an all-new episode.